This meeting is being recorded.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for coming to our training / panel this evening. Tonight, we're going to be talking about VDH and MRC, past, present, and future. So the relationship between the Medical Reserve Corps and the Virginia Department of Health, where we've been, where we're going, and what we're doing right now. We have a really exciting group of people today, and I would like to start by saying, letting you all know that make sure that you keep your mics muted. If you have questions, there will be 2 question sessions throughout the presentation, so just throw them up in the chat and I will pull them out, and then we'll address them after each round of questions for our panelists. If you have any other questions, just throw them in there. And I would like to first start by introducing Jen. I didn't do it right. Jen Chakoris.
You got it. I'm Jen Chakoris.
She's the Northern Region MRC coordinator, and she's going to be our moderator today. She's going to start by having our panelists introduce themselves. So take it away, Jen.
All right. So panelist introductions. First up is Mr. Mike Magner. He's the state MRC coordinator of the Virginia Medical Reserve Corps. Second up is Jasmine Johnson. She is, hey Jazz, I'm so sorry, your title.
I'm the Assistant Public Health Emergency Management Coordinator for Alexandria Health Department.
Thank you, Jazz. Third, Mary Wood Maloney, one of the volunteers from, I think it's Greater Richmond.
Correct.
Now it's Greater Richmond, I should say. And Santos Diaz, who is one of the volunteers from Alexandria Health Department. And so what I'd like you all to do is, first up, Mike, introduce yourself a little bit. Who are you? What's your relationship to the MRC? And if you can, single favorite MRC memory. And try to keep it all to 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay. Hey, well, good evening, everyone. So I'm Mike Magner. I'm the state volunteer coordinator. I've been on the job now for about a month. I was on here last month for the training session that occurred. So if you were on last month's session, you did hear me introduce myself at that point as well. I've been with the Department of Health since 2004. I've worked at the local health district level, starting in Henrico Health District as an emergency coordinator. Worked through there through the H1N1 2009 pandemic, and then later moved up to the Central Region position. Also worked as the state SNS and planning coordinator for a little bit. My most recent position was as the Central Region Emergency Coordinator. So most of my experience has been on the emergency planning and emergency management side for public health. One of the things I got to do in Henrico was start up a new volunteer program. And that program was started in 2006 when the state MRC program was still in its infancy. And a lot of things have been learned since then. A lot of new practices and things have been applied since then. But I'm really want to thank you guys all for attending tonight. You guys are taking time out of your busy schedule to hear about MRC past, present, future. So I hope this is a very useful session for you guys, and I hope you get a lot out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next up is Jasmine Johnson.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I am Jasmine Johnson. I am the Alexandria technically planner at the moment, so Assistant Public Health Emergency Management Coordinator. I have been with VDH for almost 6 years now. I started out with MRC as an MRC coordinator in Henrico and Chickahominy Health District. So it was long after Mike Magner had left, but that's my humble beginnings in VDH. And moved up and went to Rappahannock Area Health District as a planner. And now I'm at where I'm at. My single favorite memory of MRC would probably be the Zika response. was my first time seeing VDH MRC come together as a region to actually tackle Zika and doing the tip toss and cover campaign. I'm having trainings, regional trainings with Henrico's Standing Water Initiative folks. And so that even though it was very stressful, it was a pandemic for us at that time, it was a lot of fun. And so that is my favorite memory from being an MRC coordinator.
Thank you, Jasmine. Next up is Mary Wood Maloney from Greater Richmond MRC.
Hey guys, I'm Mary Wood Maloney. I'm from Henrico. I am a retired physical therapist. I retired right before the pandemic, one of the smartest moves of my life. I spent most of my career as a pediatric physical therapist, mostly doing early intervention, which is working with infants and toddlers ages 0 to 3 who have disabilities or are at high risk for a disability. And that involves home visiting, which I did in the Greater Richmond area and also all the way out to Farmville, Buckingham, Charlotte. So I've been on pretty much every road in Central Virginia. I got involved with MRC about 5 years ago. I think I got a letter from the Department of Health Professions offering the opportunity and kind of jumped at it as something I could do to help in my community. And so I've been involved for about 5 years and done a variety of things with the MRC. My favorite MRC memory, and there's people on here that will know about this, the last day of one of our mass vaccination clinics at the Arthur Ashe Center. It was a pretty intense experience. I think a lot of us were there, 15, 20 hours a week. We were working in teams and working with health department folks. And it was really an amazing experience. In the time we were there, we vaccinated tens of thousands of people. So the last day we were there, we were closing. It was very bittersweet. And after we were done with the day, and now these are people we had worked with for 4 months, pretty much almost every day. And after we were done, we went for a little outside gathering and everybody took their masks off and we had no idea who anybody was. It was completely disorienting. Your idea of what people look like is not what they really look like. So it was really a strange moment to these people that you'd spent more time with than your family for months. And you really honestly had no idea what they looked like. And it was a very bittersweet moment. We were sad that the event was ending. And I think the funniest part of it is 10 days later, we were all back together again, just at a different location. But that working the mass vaccination clinics was a very powerful experience and one that I'll really treasure for the rest of my life.
Thank you, Mary. And last introduction, but definitely not least introduction, is Mr. Santos Diaz from Alexandria.
Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. My name is Santos Diaz. I'm MRC volunteer. When I'm not volunteering, I'm working in construction or home improvement. As I say, I'm a volunteer. I'm part of the MRC unit in the beautiful city of Alexandria. I have been a volunteer for some time now. Well, I have a lot of memories of things that have happened during my volunteer deployments and trainings with MRC, but there is one that stands out the most. There was this time when I was in one of these like mass vaccination sites, the big ones. I was standing out because I kind of like to work in flow. So that I was really lucky that they will assign me to do flow like every single time. So I was standing outside, and then all of a sudden I heard someone yelling, Santos, Santos, Santos. And then I look back and I look around and I couldn't see anybody. All of a sudden I saw a lady with a cane that she was raising her hand saying Santos, but she was not, I was almost in front of her, but she was not looking at me. She was looking the other way. And then I realized that like a month before I had help, she was actually visually impaired. But you know what struck me the most was that she remembered my voice. And she said, oh, is that you? And then I remember her name. So I tell her, is that you? Yes, Santos. Oh, well, you know what? I just heard your voice and I knew you were here. So that's why I started yelling, so you can help me again. I said, man, if this person that she only heard my name, my voice, can be so grateful, imagine the people that can actually see us. So that was a really, really, really good experience for me and one of my best memories with MRC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Santos. Let's see. first round of questions. Mr. Mike Magner, would you please give us a brief history of the MRC in Virginia and the relationship between the Virginia Department of Health and the MRC?
Hey, good evening. And Jenna, I forgot to do my favorite MRC memory, but I'll do it as part of the answer to this question. So you'll hear that in just a minute. But just, a brief history of the MRC. Mrc program was initially started in response to the September 11th attacks of 2001. If you'll remember, after that horrendous event occurred, there were a lot of spontaneous volunteers that wanted to show up and help at the World Trade Center and at the Pentagon. And there was no way that they could manage that outpouring of grassroots support. And the volunteers that showed up, they weren't trained, they were unorganized, they weren't vetted. So they couldn't use them. And so a lot of people left very frustrated that, they weren't able to help when they felt like their nation and their fellow citizens needed them. And that was very discouraging. So the MRC program began nationally in 2002 as part of the National Citizens Corps program. And that the Citizen Corps program involved the Medical Reserve Corps, or MRC, and the Citizens Emergency Response Team, or CERT program. And also after September 11th, in October of 2001, we had the anthrax letter attacks, where somebody was mailing actual anthrax spores to various places around the country. And so a lot of people were exposed to anthrax. And so the medical countermeasure for that is a heavy dose of antibiotics for 60 days, either ciprofloxacin or doxycycline. And so initially the Health and Human Services and CDC responded to those events, but they realized if we had a much bigger anthrax attack, if somebody were to get a crop duster and fill it with those anthrax spores and dump it on a big city, that we would have to prophylax, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people within 48 hours. And so we realized we didn't have enough staff in the public health workforce to manage an event like that. And we also needed a way to more effectively utilize volunteers for other events. So that's why those programs were started in 2002. And the initial purpose of the MRC program explains why it's structured the way it was. We needed lots of medical and non-medical volunteers alike, because mass dispensing sites and mass vaccination sites require a lot of staff to manage traffic flow, screen clients, and determine the right dosage of medication, educate clients, answer questions, and process client records. In fact, majority of the tasks at these sites are non-medical in nature. So in Virginia, the MRC program really didn't get underway until September of 2003, with 12 units that stood up pretty much all at once in Virginia. And initially, there was no dedicated funding for the MRC program, as it was initially thought of, as a volunteer program. And the thought was, well, if it's volunteer, it'd be volunteer run. And so therefore, there was no funding needed. However, over time, we learned that volunteer management requires, some significant resource and full-time staff to ensure the optimal level of success, and to enable a surge response like we saw, most recently with COVID. And so, over the next several years, other health districts began establishing MRC units over the, in their districts as well. And so that brings me to my MRC memory. So in 2006, as a local health district emergency coordinator, I decided to establish a local MRC program. So I contacted the Department of Health Professions, and they sent me an Excel spreadsheet with all of the licensed providers in Henrico County. It was about 2,000 some people at the time. And using mail merge, I created a letter in Microsoft Word that I could mail out to all 2,000 professionals. And, it was, mail merge feature allowed me to put the addresses on automatically throughout names and addresses, and print out the letters and the envelopes. However, I still needed to fold and stuff 2,000 envelopes. So I brought my daughter into work with me, who was 9, and she just helped me for a few hours, just folding and stuffing envelopes, and she had a great time. So that's my favorite MRC memory. That was 2006. Obviously, the Henrico MRC over time merged with Chickahominy, and then later with Richmond to become the Greater Richmond MRC unit, and that just happened this past year. But also, the National Associations of City and County Health Officials started to provide some small funding for different programs. And then, the Virginia Department of Health was able to create some funding out of the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Grant. And a lot of MRC coordinators were hired under that grant. Some of them had to work as part-time because there was limited funding, or they had to utilize another grant, work part-time under, like, whether it's car seat distribution program or infant mortality, and then half-time on the MRC. But things have gotten a lot better since then. And I think this is a really exciting time to be on, as we just came through, a very large pandemic. And also we're celebrating our 20th birthday this year as a program. So lots of excitement, and we'll talk later on about what we can expect in the years to come. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Mike. Jasmine, next question is for Jasmine. How have you seen the program evolve in your time with the VDH?
Thank you, Jen. So I really believe the evolving came during this pandemic. The MRC has been doing the same bread and butter, focusing on vaccinations, doing a little bit of partnering within our health departments with our different agencies, our environmental health, our EPIs, and nursing team. But this pandemic has showed that there's more that MRC can do. That they can do infection control. They can go to the polls and hold their, for in Alexandria, I don't know how other districts do it, but we take rulers into our polling stations to make sure people are being 6 feet apart. So the evolving has really, this pandemic has showed, I'm proud. I am absolutely proud. It has showed that MRC is so much more than to do a pod and vaccination, right? That's what we've always done, right, Mike? We've done flu pods. That's our thing. But we've been trying to, I know in my Chickahominy days, we've been trying to get into restaurants to do choke response training. And now in my MRC days, I see more with the epidemiologists and continuing that infection control in long-term care facilities. We never did that. We never did that. And so it has opened not only I would say the planners' eyes, but the health departments, the health directors, that has opened their eyes to see so much more of that support that MRC can provide to our health department, to VDH. To use that regional asset. I mean, oh my goodness, the Afghan response. A lot of MRC volunteers were out there fit testing. I mean, we have a fit testing team in Alexandria. Thank you, Santos, for joining. But we have a fit testing team. We had fit testing out at our long-term care facilities when there was none. So yes, we have not only involved, we are moving forward with our program. So I am excited to be a part of this evolution. Like I said, from my humble beginning at MRC, and Michael, I was the reason why MRC Henrico and Chickahominy joined, because I couldn't handle two by myself. So that was this one. And then working with Kate when she was at Richmond. So I mean, it's where I think we're going to continue to evolve. And I think we're continuing to do more things within VDH. I mean, MRC in Virginia, we are the bomb.com. Jennifer has said that 1,000 times, and we absolutely are. So I am very proud of being a part of this organization, and we will keep pushing forward as a unit.
Thank you, Jasmine. Next up, Santos Diaz. What brought you to the MRC and what has kept you engaged for more than 10 years?
Okay. First of all, this is actually what my parents taught me. You know that we are never too poor that we cannot be able to give to others, and we are never too rich that we cannot never need from others. So, and that regardless of our situation, there's always something that we can do for the well-being of our community and to improve the other people's life. But other than that, what brought me to MRC specifically was the fact that it was so easy to sign up. I went online, I Googled volunteer opportunities in Alexandria City. I got Alive, I had Volunteer Alexandria, I had SAPCA, and there was also MRC. But when I went to the MRC page, everything was so smooth. It was one click away to sign up. And then that was the easiest one. So I went in there and I started my application, blah, blah, blah. And then, well, after a while, I realized that I wasn't fit. I wasn't qualified to be an MRC volunteer because it says medical reserve corps. And I said, man, but my highest medical skill is just like probably applying a Band-Aid. I said, then I just left my application right there. But after a while, it looks like they do some good housekeeping in the MRC. And they got an email and say, you know what, you are perfectly qualified. 70% of MRC volunteers are actually non-medical and 30% are medical. So you're welcome to join. And I said, man, that was a very happy day for me. So when I started, I was eagerly waiting for my first deployment opportunity. And it was actually a flu vaccination clinic, which was done like, I think it was yearly. So I was always looking out for that. And what actually has kept me engaged for the years that I have been a volunteer, well, I don't think it has been that long. So mostly is the training. There's always training opportunities. There's always community events that you can help out with through food festivals in communities, emergency preparedness, outreach, and so many others. So that's mostly what has been like a support for me, and the actual fact that being an MRC, it makes you feel like you're part of a family. So when they treat you, you visit the office, you go to see my coordinator, Yunela, man, it's like I've known them forever. So that's a really part that has kept me engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Santos. And last but not least of this round, Mary, what are some of the notable deployments you've participated in, and how do you feel they've impacted your community?
Thanks. I haven't been involved as long as Santos, so I'll just give you the last 5 years of my involvement. I've tried to sign up for everything that came along prior to COVID. Every time something popped up on my email or text, I was really anxious to get involved because I just saw the value of the MRC. Obviously, the flu vaccine clinics were something that I participated in. And when we were doing these vaccine clinics, which seemed large at the time for 100 or something people, I was just always fascinated by the level of detail in the planning and how much went into that. And I had no idea until COVID how that plan just got scaled up to move on to these mass vaccination clinics, and how we'd actually been practicing for COVID all along. But I didn't know that. Other people knew that, but I certainly didn't know that. I worked on some back to school clinics where we did vaccinations and checkups for kids. That's a lot of chaos. It's a lot of kindergartners, but that was always really fun. I had the opportunity to volunteer at the Special Olympics in a wellness area that we put together. And for me, using my PT skills, just did some exercise instruction kind of things. And that was really fun. That is a really amazing event. And it was the state Special Olympics. So there were hundreds and hundreds of athletes and their families, which was really rewarding. Another program that I got involved in was working with the health department nurses on teaching parents how to install safety seats, car seats correctly, and also how to restrain their children correctly. And that's part of the free safety seat program that the health department was managing. And I was able to go to the training to learn exactly how to teach that and work with the health department nurses. And that's working with a lot of expectant families. And I just found that really rewarding, knowing that when they left, we could be pretty sure that they were going to put the car seat in correctly. Sometimes we actually installed it in the car, depending on the vehicle that they had, that it was going to be installed correctly and their child was going to be restrained correctly, which, you know, that's a good feeling because that's a mistake a lot of new parents make. And then obviously COVID came and moved on to COVID testing. And then I spent an enormous amount of time working in the vaccine clinics. I started out in the vaccine clinics working a lot of different jobs. And then I sort of settled on liking to do what we call in our area internal traffic, which means basically moving hordes of people around giant rooms in some sort of efficient manner, keeping people socially distanced, calming nerves for people. And then as the vaccine clinics went on, that whole part of the clinic got more and more complicated because we were providing multiple types of vaccines in each clinic. At one point we had 2 registration systems and 3 different types of vaccines, and you had to make sure people got to the right vaccinator, the right table. You know, worked with I probably in days at Arthur Ashe, I probably talked to 700 or 800 people in a day. And you know, that is really, it's really rewarding. It's exhausting, but at the end of the day, knowing that in those clinics we got 1,500 people safe from COVID was very powerful. I look forward to what's next.
Thank you, Mary. Next up is audience Q&A. So everybody that's watching, if you would please put your questions into the chat and we will answer them.
Yes, and if I don't get to you right this second, then we'll save them for the end. And if you have a question for a specific panelist, put their name first, and then we'll get it going. Thank you all so much. I love hearing all these stories.
While people are thinking of their questions, I want to go ahead and thank again a couple of our panelist members, Mary and Santos, our volunteers who volunteered to help train our other volunteers by participating in this panel and sharing your great stories and memories. And it's, you know, it could come from me all day, but when they hear it from other volunteers, I think it's much more meaningful. You guys have been in the trenches and done some great things. And so I really appreciate you guys sharing your stories.
Mike, I agree. Does anybody have any questions? We have a major highlight, helping with COVID clinic and meeting amazing people. Agreed, 100%. Any questions?
And Santos, I apologize for making fun of you in the chat just because you got your still picture on looking like a ventriloquist with your lips not moving. And your picture looks so serious, but
it's totally fine. That's how you will see me out on the street or on any deployment. Very serious.
But I can tell you're very uplifting.
Until we start a conversation.
He's not telling the truth. He's not that serious.
We have a question. Yay.
I never get to the screen in time. Why are the slots filled before I even get to the email? I'm assuming you're asking about alerts. Yeah, so that would be because there are a whole lot of people trying to sign up for the same event. And unfortunately, especially now as things are winding down, we just don't have as many. Uh-oh, Jen has a sneaky pro tip. I don't know if we should let her give it or not. There just aren't as many activities. Mike, do you have anything to say to that?
I want to hear Jen's tip. I'm curious.
Yes.
All right. So this goes. So not only am I the regional coordinator, I'm also a volunteer. Before I knew everything, if I knew then what I know now, not much would have changed. But here's my sneaky pro tip. So a lot of people, I don't know if you're one of them, Kristen, has a bunch of volunteers that are friends. Some of them have their phone numbers in their phones. And back in the early days of my volunteering with the MRC, we had 1 or 2 people that would get the email. We don't know how, but they would for some reason get the email within 2 seconds of it being sent. To this day, they still do. We don't know how, but they text all of us and say, refresh your email right away. You got to refresh it because a new alert just came out, you gotta go. And it was amazing how much quicker I was finding out about alerts. So that's one idea that I've had. That was the sneaky pro tip, because a bunch of volunteers in Prince William are just like, wait a minute, you guys have been sitting on this for how long? So the secret's out. If you've got your group of
Now
friends,
everyone's in
somebody
trouble.
says, I just got an alert, jump on it.
Yeah, we definitely had folks at vaccination events on their phones when they shouldn't be, waiting for the alerts to come out. Does anybody else have any questions for any of the panelists? That's in the next set of questions, all of those. Joan. All right, so Jen, you want to go ahead and start the next set of questions?
Sure, and I agree with Pat. While it is frustrating not to get a slot, it really is awesome to know that there are this many people volunteering. That's 100% correct. It's awesome. It's awe-inspiring. And how fast y'all are, to Kristen's point again, how fast people are at clicking. Holy cow. Okay, second round. First up, Santos, what type of activities would you like to see offered in the future for MRC volunteers? And also, what do you see as a challenge that your units face, or that your unit faces, and how do you feel that they can be met?
Okay, let's start with first with the activities that I would like to see offered to the MRC volunteers. You know, we are like, as I said, like a big family. There's so much people that we don't know, but we know that are kind of compassionate like us. I think maybe like if we can have probably like a day in the year, maybe after COVID, kind of because of COVID, we cannot do it now. Or maybe when things go back to kind of normal, like to have a big reunion of like several MRC units, maybe by region. And so we can come together, have some good time, chit chat, eat something there. And I think that would be one of good activities out of the volunteer setting, you see, like meet as a friend, but also as a family. What I see as a challenge here, actually, you know, when the COVID-19 got here, there was like a great influx of volunteers coming into the MRC unit, but that was because some of them were like being sent to home to most of them were doing work from home. Most of them they were not working, so they were finding other things to do while they were not doing anything, right? So some of them they joined the MRC, some of them they joined on other volunteers opportunities, and then but then immediately after there was this decline in volunteers after COVID was like almost gone. It was because maybe because they went back to work, some of them they had other things in mind to do. But I mean, I think there's a challenge that when we have this amount of volunteers, then all of a sudden they are not there, and then the threat continues, right? What about if we have a spike in COVID cases, or we need to kind of ramp up the volunteer crew and everything? So it will be good to kind of try to keep them engaged, or like us, like volunteers, try to probably talk to our friends, talk to our neighbors, talk to our own family, to try to get them to join the MRC, because sometimes we can, because we have a job, and we cannot volunteer on every single opportunity. But if we can, maybe the person that we were like encouraged to sign up, then the person will be there to fill your spot. So that's one of the things that we can probably do. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Santos. Mary, same set of questions. What types of activities would you like to see offered in the future for the MRC volunteers? And also, what do you see as a challenge that your units face in Greater Richmond, and how can they be met?
Okay, I think for me, having worked in basically working with children and families in their homes, my professional and personal interest is really in child and family health and safety. And I know there are organizations and agencies within the health department and other agencies that address healthy families, but I think they're chronically undersourced and underfunded and understaffed. And from working with a lot of families in their homes, almost every parent wants to do right. I think they just don't know how. And especially when it comes to things like safety. bike helmets and car seats and lead paint and nutrition. And in my area, of course, it was typical development and what is that supposed to look like for a family. And you know, especially as I got further and further away from Richmond, and even in the rural Richmond area, there's not a lot of resources for families, and families who may only get to one community center once every 6 months or something. And just thinking about ways that the MRC could get involved in providing information. The information is out there, the agencies are out there, the help is out there. I think parents really just don't know how to access it. So that's just my own personal, that's the soapbox I've been standing on for 40 years. And I think it's just really important to realize parents really want to do right. They just a lot of times don't have the resources to do it. And the health department and other organizations don't have the resources either to do all the outreach that could be done that really might make a difference. So, you know, working with people at community centers and getting out at community events and trying to maybe not be the expert on typical development or the expert on bike helmets or the expert on car seats, but providing the information about where you could get that, keeping kids safe at home and also away from home. I think the challenge is a lot of what Santos said. It's just keeping people engaged. I think the COVID vaccine response especially was so intense, and it consumed a lot of people. It consumed a lot of us. It was sort of the driving force. Again, like Santos said, you really couldn't go anywhere, but you could get in your car and you could drive to the vaccine clinic and make a difference every day. And it was really reinforcing. And I think it's a little bit hard as we back away from those clinics to keep people engaged and excited about MRC. And it is the distance part of it too, as he mentioned, just not seeing those people. And quite honestly, it's kind of anticlimactic. You do all this really intense work with these people and you get really close with people and then it's over. And, you know, the vaccine clinics sort of phased out, but they sort of ended with a kind of a thump. And I think trying to make sure that all those really valuable volunteers find a way to come back into your system and making people understand that, you know, we have to be prepared for the next thing, and, you know, working with folks on that preparedness and training people up for the next thing and keeping people engaged so that when the next thing happens, it's not this major scale up that had to happen with COVID with MRC. I mean, we had MRC volunteers, but we didn't have thousands of them, and we needed thousands of them. And the MRC folks did such a fabulous job of just bringing these people in and getting everybody working and involved. And it was amazing. And you hate to see all that effort go to waste if we have all these really great, competent people sort of sitting on the sidelines, not really knowing what to do. And I would say the other thing about MRC is we can be very honest about it. A lot of the people are my age and retired, and would love to see outreach to folks who are younger. We got younger people in at the vaccine clinics. Again, like Santos said, people that weren't working, but at the time, but it'd be really nice to have to be able to bring those younger folks into the fold. You hate to think that there's going to be another disaster like COVID, but you just want to be ready in case it does come about. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. And you're right, it's true what they say, hope for the best, plan for the worst. Next question is for Jasmine. What do you see your local unit looking like post-COVID and on into the next 2 to 3 years?
Oh my goodness. I am answering for my MRC coordinator, Yanela, do not kill me. So our, you know, with COVID ending, one of the things is how do we get back to normal and what does that look like? In Alexandria, we are still doing small strike team, we call them nanopods, vaccination clinics in our schools and rec centers, community events. So that is still ongoing. We do have contract workers that are in there, but you know who fills the holes when we don't have it is our MRC. right? With short vaccinators, we send out an alert. With short flow, Santos sometimes just pops up without even saying anything. But, you know, we have that backfill of that support from our MRC volunteers. So as for moving forward, Yanela has developed a strategic plan for our Meadow Preserve Core unit that feeds into our public health emergency management strategic plan. So we have two strategic plans that are merged together. One of the things that I guess it helps me being a former MRC coordinator, because I see the bigger value, the bigger picture of where MRC fits into our structure, is that we need to be training along the side, and I'm keeping my hands like this, with VDH, with our AHD health department. And the trainings that our AHD health department will do, our MRC will do. They may be on the nights, it may be on the weekends, it may be in the daytime if they're available, but that is our plan. We wanted, and where we saw that gap was when it was time for fit testing. Alexandria is a little bit extra. We fit tested all of our staff members, as we should, every year to make sure that you know, their respirator fits appropriately. When COVID first came out, we didn't know what it was. So we had to fit test our MRC volunteers that were supporting us in the testing sites. Then we realized we needed a larger fit testing car aid. So we sent volunteers to fit testing training. So it seemed like a trickle effect, and the link that was missing was that MRC doing the training with the health department, because we're a team. We're really not separate. When we had the call center open, the volunteers were in that call center working. When we were at pods, they were right beside us the whole entire time, and they should have the same trainings that our staff do. And that is our plan moving forward. Of course, I'm transitioning words from mine, I, to ours, our MRC, right? Not my MRC, our MRC, it's ours. And that keeps us that focus of team building, working together. With the strategic plans going through, as I'm tooting our own horn, in the next 2 to 3 years, we're looking at having some pretty decent sized strike teams, some more fit testing teams, infection control, working more within the health department, digging in, finding out what our needs are, preparing for that next TB event that we have to go to at school. Don't know when it's going to happen. Do I want to wait? I'm a planner. I don't want to wait till it happens. I want to be prepared and have that team ready to say we're ready to go. And so Yanela is working very hard to focus on that resiliency, the trainings, the exercises. They're going to be roped into our exercises that we have planned. That goes with our integrated preparedness plan, also known as MITEP. So we have a lot of things going on in Alexandria. We will have a very strong unit. Yanela, let me know if I speak out of turn. But we are looking forward to having a very strong unit in the next 2 to 3 years. We're strong now. We can be even stronger, and then definitely doing things more regionally with the Northern Virginia MRC coordinators. Absolutely. So that is definitely our plan. And as always, we'll push forward.
Thank you, Jasmine. Last question of this round goes to Mr. Mike Magner. What is the long-term vision for the MRC at the state level?
Hey, thank you for that question, Jen. And, I just want to add on to what our other, volunteers and other panelists have expressed. So, we do know that we saw this huge increase in volunteer numbers for COVID, and especially when we implemented our vaccination campaign, and that was the single largest and longest and biggest deployment of MRC volunteers ever in our history. It was also the fastest that we've ever onboarded, literally tens of thousands of people, sometimes in a day. And that required us to do some different things at the state level. When I say we, really mean Jennifer Freeland and her team, because I wasn't doing it at the time. I can't take any credit. But they went through and they worked through the challenges of just simply going through the onboarding and the background check process, and and setting up, orientation events and vaccination training events, and kind of doing it large scale state level training. So we have, this great work that's been done. And so my first thing is, let's not lose that work, right? So let's capture our lessons learned. Let's maintain the good practices that we picked up, and kind of even build on that and improve. And we've got a very solid foundation. So the Virginia Volunteer Health System, which has gone through a series of changes based on, our findings throughout this huge event, different ways we can enhance the program and make it better. And we've got, a volunteer health system that's the ESAR VIP, if you will, the envy of all of the other states, pretty much. We just, several of us went to the National Association of City and County Health Officials preparedness conference and talked to other MRC coordinators and other parts of the country. And there's some of them are still using Excel spreadsheets or even paper-based records to register and track their volunteers. So we've got a great program and a great foundation, but I still haven't answered your question, Jen, about the the longer term vision. So, first of all, we do want to build on our lessons learned. And so that's the first part of positioning ourselves for the future. We do anticipate that some of our volunteers will lose some interest in the program, and that's okay. Or, we do have a status that volunteers can go to called level 5. If they say, you know what, I'm tired of getting alerts all the time. I just don't have time anymore. I was in a position a year ago where I had all this time to volunteer and now I don't. Going into level 5 allows you to stay in the program and stay active, but it keeps you from getting all of the alerts for all the events. But we still ask you to go in every now and then to your account, make sure it's updated. If your address changes, your email changes, or whatever, and you can always turn it back on whenever you're ready to volunteer again. So that's one way, a tool that we'll have to retain people. But we do intend to use you guys as well. I mean, our health departments are going to step back from COVID. They are decreasing some of their COVID events, but we have so many public health problems that were exacerbated by the pandemic that were pre-existing. The opioid crisis was going gangbusters before COVID, and it's even worse now. So, doing naloxone training and dispensing is going to be a huge project. STIs, or sexually transmitted infections, in Virginia have also increased during the pandemic. So there's going to be a lot of work and outreach and working in our clinics. We did see increases in hepatitis A and hepatitis C. And of course, there's the ongoing need to vaccinate our children every year, for whether it's back to school vaccines, whether it's flu vaccine, whether it's other diseases. A lot of work to be done in addressing health equity in our communities. So when COVID kind of laid bare, the underlying health inequities, I should say, that already existed in our communities, and looking at different ways that we can address that, how we can get health information and resources to people. So I see that as being kind of the near term. We have hurricane season coming up, and we haven't done shelter training in most of the state, and we rely very heavily on MRC volunteers to help provide first aid and special medical needs services in our shelters. And so, that's going to be the next big project. Before COVID, we were talking about some mission ready packages that we'd like to develop to allow us to send, shelter teams or federal medical station teams to other states. For instance, when North Carolina was devastated by the hurricane in 2017 or 2018. We did send some volunteers to North Carolina, and they did participate in relief events. However, it wasn't really well coordinated. And so we had a lot of lessons learned from that. We were starting to work on that and building that when COVID hit. So, and now we've got a new partnership with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. We already had emergency mass fatality teams that were set up and could respond to emergency mass fatality events. The problem with that is, maintaining a team that hardly ever deploys is hard. So we've come up with a new program, and we're working on this now with OCME, where volunteers can actually work on a weekly basis at one of their 4 regional offices and participate in sort of like day-to-day autopsy assistance or records, administration assistance, or help with death investigations. And so that program is going to be announced in more detail, fairly soon, and we're going to have a special training event just on that. And then we started a ham radio operator identification process a few years back, just in touch with our comms team earlier this week, and they're excited about expanding our ham radio operator team. So again, lots of new and exciting ways that volunteers will continue to have, opportunities to serve and do things that are different. And then yet some of the same things are still going to be there, like routine vaccination clinics, emergency response exercises. I do see the districts this year, maybe this fall, not cutting back on their mass vaccination exercises, because guess what? They've tested their mass vaccination plans a few times this year and don't necessarily need to do a big exercise, but they do, might need to do COVID boosters. Who knows if we'll have an annual booster in the fall each year, and of course the flu vaccine. So that may continue to be an option as well. And Jen, do we want to start taking some of the questions that have popped up in the chat?
Yeah, that's next.
Sure do.
So
Thank you,
the
Mike.
first one, is there a minimum number of times you have to volunteer to be considered active? That's typically unit specific, but through COVID, we weren't sending drills. Typically when I was and Jasmine and Mike can also talk to this, but when I was the Richmond coordinator, we would do a quarterly drill. And as long as you were responding to those, then you were considered active. But it is typically unit specific. Mike, unless you want to go bigger than that moving forward and make everybody do the same thing.
Now let me talk through that a little bit. So yeah, the quarterly drills were really just to make sure that you were still like a living, breathing volunteer that was available to deploy. So sometimes, people move, they change their address, or they get tired of MRC alerts, so they, get a new phone and ditch all their old contacts. And, we just want to make sure you haven't ghosted us. And, if you don't respond to an alert, we don't immediately put you in the, the MRC jail. We, we'll try to make additional attempts to contact you. And then, if we can't reach you, then we might put you in a hold status, or what we call it, archive status, or what's the name?
Archive. If you to cancel a profile, yeah, that would be an archival.
Yeah.
But archive is not a forgotten zone either. So I think that's a misnomer. That's a little bit of a misunderstanding. If you archive, you don't get any communication anymore, even unlike the 5ER. But with archival, if you ever decide, yeah, it's addictive, I want to come back, I want to have fun with the MRC again, we just reactivate the account.
Yeah, and archival is not the same as the level 5 program. So level 5 is
Correct.
a voluntary status that you go into. The other thing that we've been working on is trying to decrease what we call our level 4 volunteers. So when a person signs up for MRC and their application gets approved, they get put into a level 4 status until they complete all of their initial orientation training and get enough training to be considered deployable. And so level 4s are non-deployables. Often what happens is people sign up, they start to, participate in some of the training, and they decide this isn't really for them. And so they kind of stop participating. And so they kind of get stuck in that level 4 limbo. And when that happens, our unit coordinators are going to try and contact you and find out, are you really still interested in being a volunteer, or, is there something wrong? And if you're not, then we can, either archive you or put you in that level 5 status. But, that's why that is done, so that we can report honestly when we do our metrics up to the National MRC program and up to the governor, and we say we've got X number of deployable volunteers. We like to have, a good solid number that we can say, yes, we can really rely on X number to deploy in an emergency.
I
Thanks,
just
Mike.
wanted to speak to that real quick. In Alexandria, we actually also, we would send our alerts as part of we do the health alert networks for the health department. And so we would do it at the same time just to make sure that they, as Michael has said, they're alive and breathing, and that they can read their alert and then just respond to let us know that's just part of the response, so we can reach out to our volunteers in emergency. So yes, it is definitely MRC specific to your jurisdiction, but that is how we do it in Alexandria.
Great, thank you so much. What exercises are planned to use as training events before the need presents? So I will say that today in the training work group meeting, we spoke about doing regional mass casualty tabletops. And then Mike, you can talk about all the other ones we're gonna do.
So I don't know of any specific regional exercises that are on the horizon. But we have done in the past tabletop exercises. We've done things with the Virginia Power Station exercise with, Surrey and North Anna, where we, set up potassium iodide dispensing sites, if you will, reception assembly centers. And so those exercises typically occur, every year. The last couple of years, they were scaled back because of COVID. So there was less opportunity to use volunteers in those events. And I can see, continued EPI training now that we've got people trained to do contact tracing investigation. Perhaps our districts will, continue to keep those volunteers active and keep those skills up as well.
Great, thank you. And then how does a new member go about receiving their ID badge and MRC t-shirt? I would say reach out to your coordinator.
That's the right answer. So reach out to your unit coordinator. There was an effort in the last few weeks to actually identify people who hadn't been badged yet and actually mail out ID badges. But we're taking a database, and some of the data may not have been fully accurate. Somebody might be marked as yes, they got a badge, and maybe they didn't, or maybe they lost it. They need a new one, or they got a new face or something. They want a new one or something. But definitely reach out to your unit MRC coordinator for that, and they'll work. If they can't help you directly, they'll work with my team to get you guys a new badge and a shirt.
And then and a shirt. Can you explain each MRC level is one of the questions.
I'm going to let one of the other panelists do that because I don't want to screw it up.
Jazz. I feel like that's Jazz.
Oh, it's been so long. So I have a wonderful MRC coordinator. So let's see, level 4 is please help me out. Level 4 is you just newly registered. You have not been through the rest of the process of getting that wonderful email of welcome to the unit from your unit coordinator, and sent your ID in and all that fun stuff, and take some trainings and so forth. After all that, can't forget the background check. Your background check must be done as well. After that goes through, then you become a level 3. And then I am so hazy. And level 4, not deployable. I'm getting help. And then with level 3, you are deployable, and you are able to do, respond to alerts, and go to, events, outreach, and so forth. Level 3 is you take, so it's different in Alexandria, before, as I'm getting help from my MRC coordinator, because we do have our MRC volunteers do 100 and 700. And the reason being for that is to make that we know that they understand ICS and that they are able to take supervisory roles in our pods, as Santos is one of those volunteers. And then, once again, still getting help. Level 2 is 200 and 800. And then level 1 is all the above. And so we do encourage, and once again, it's different in Alexandria. We do encourage our volunteers to take those courses, just for the fact that during our pod events, our COVID events, we did see up to almost 2,000 people in some of those pods, that a lot of our MRC volunteers actually were supervisors, section chiefs, and so forth. But that is how we do it. But Kate, I think, would be helpful to say how other units do it, because, you know.
I just dropped it in the chat. So it's typically,
Thank you.
If you're a level 3 volunteer, then you're good to go. And, you know, as long as it doesn't, whatever you're going to do doesn't take specific training like vaccinator or things like that. And then levels 1 and 2 are just taking additional, typically ICS courses. But level 3s are just as good as everybody else. And then can you explain what a tabletop exercise is?
I was starting to put it in a chat because I know we're running kind of long, but I'll just go ahead and answer it. So
I think we have till 8.
Okay, well, it is exactly what it sounds like. So it's a verbal exercise around a table. You know, it can be in a conference room. Sometimes it's just around one table, or sometimes you'll be in a conference room with multiple tables and stations. But it's really, you're just talking through a scenario, you know, like, here's a scenario that happens. What would you do if this happens? And then you kind of work through with your table mates and kind of come up with a course of action, and then you brief out the action, and then they say, okay, now this has happened. What do you do now? And so it's really, that's just all it is. It's not a full scale exercise. So we don't have, typically we only have the leaders present, or maybe a few people representing, you know, each of the sections involved, but not everybody who would be going through that exercise. So it's really kind of to verify that our plans, you know, could work in a real scenario. So, you know, for instance, we do a hurricane evacuation tabletop exercise at the state level. It used to be every year, and we've kind of gotten away from that the last few years, but they kind of say, okay, hurricane's coming, it's bearing down on the coast, you know, Governor, what point do you declare an emergency, and what point do you do, you know, what's your criteria for an emergency evacuation? Where do those people go? How long does it take you to set up that shelter for them? What's your transportation plan? But it's all spoken. There's no actual moving parts.
Sometimes there's little models. I've seen MCIs where they like have little cars. Okay, any other questions for now? We're going to go on to the last thoughts section. Jen?
Yes, ma'am. All right, so the last, as Kate said, last 1 or 2 brief last thoughts. Jasmine, you're up first.
Oh, joy. So so I guess my last thought, or the final thought, right, would be, one, keep doing what you guys are doing. Y'all are wonderful. VDH health departments would not have been able to make it through this pandemic without you guys. So let me start there. One of my, I guess one of my focuses on our unit is really to start focusing on community preparedness. Michael hit a good point, sheltering. That is something that we're looking forward to. Working more with our CERT members is something that we do here well in Alexandria. So that will be something that we will, of course, continue. Because as Santos has mentioned earlier, we have a really strong volunteer team up in here with Alexandria Mrc, CERT, Volunteer Alexandria, which is a great, and actually a lot of our MRC volunteers are CERT, a lot of our CERT are MRC, so we are joined at the hip with that. But definitely focusing on that community preparedness, that community resiliency is very important. If anything was noticed during this COVID response, is that, you know, some of our community members, excuse me for saying, got lost in the sauce. and making sure we're focusing on hesitancy when it comes to vaccine, doing that outreach, doing that preparedness outreach, and making sure that we are on top of it. So that's my final thought. Thank you, and thank you again.
Thank you, Jasmine. Santos, you are up next.
Oh, okay. Well, my final thought is like, if we want to keep our MRC strong and ready, we need to, this is actually for my fellow volunteers here, that we need to take as much training opportunities as we can. They are totally free, so you just need to make the time to take them so we are better prepared for any emergency that might arise. Also, to maybe if you can just mark on our calendars, or I'm going to volunteer at least once a month. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's just 1 hour, 2 hours that you give from your time. It makes a huge difference in other people's lives. So that is very important to keep training and to be volunteering as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Santos. Mary, what are your last thoughts?
I think I want to take just my minute to just reflect on what I think are the amazing strengths of the MRC and the partnership with the health departments. That collaboration, just bringing together two groups of people who really, really care. And I think it's super powerful, and it's an amazing thing to be part of. And I've been a volunteer in lots of organizations in my life. And a lot of times you go into volunteer and they send you over in the corner with a little task. And when you're done, you go home. Or the paid staff is annoyed that you're there. And the MRC experience has been completely different every single time, not just the vaccine clinics, but every single time I've volunteered with MRC, I've been welcomed as a volunteer and I've been appreciated as a volunteer. And I think that that is a very unusual thing. And I think it's what does keep a lot of us wanting to continue with working with the MRC, because not only are you valued, you're really treated with the respect of someone. They treat you as if you might know something, and then you could be a partner with them. And I think that is just very unusual. And when you think about MRC and you think of the decades of experience a lot of people are bringing into that volunteer experience, the VDH staff has seemed to be able to just recognize that and recognize the wealth of experience that comes in with these MRC people and to use it. And to be treated as an equal partner, for example, when we're planning a new clinic and sounding people out, what do the volunteers think? How should we set this thing up? Or, you know, certainly when the wheels fell off on a couple of our clinics and the best laid plans were just not working at all. When that huddle came, it wasn't just the VDH staff, it was the MRC people too, and everybody putting their heads together as equals, trying to figure out how are we going to make this work? You know, we just had 300 people show up when we thought we'd have 50. So what exactly are we going to do here? And I think that that is just really powerful. And I think it allows the health departments to harness the power of the MRC because of the respect that the MRC volunteers are given. And I want to give a shout out to Kate because she was one of my coordinators, but all the coordinators out there. I think that your intentional appreciation of the MRC is a very unusual thing for volunteers. And I just want to express my own personal gratitude for that. Thanks, Kate.
Mike? Thanks, Mary. And Mike, what are your last thoughts?
Hey, thank you. Hey, real quick before I go in there, I know David had a question that wasn't answered. You know, his question was, there are hundreds of MRC volunteers with COVID vaccination training, you know, but VDH hires a contractor to run the pod. Seems like VDH is wasting millions of dollars. I can see where, from your perspective, you know, you can certainly say that, and I wouldn't blame you for having that opinion on it. What I will tell you is that, you know, VDH has gotten access to a lot of resources that we typically don't have in emergency, and a lot of federal assistance in terms of funding for different grants and different projects. And, you know, we always weigh, you know, where's the best place that we can use a particular resource and get the most bang for our buck. So we are looking at, you know, we have used you know, the contract pods for the large scale vaccination centers that had to run, you know, 6 days a week. And also understand, even though we're using a lot of volunteers, someone from the health department staff has to manage that. And so that's taking, a set amount of resources. And if we have a contractor that can just do that piece for us, that allows the health department to focus not only its staff, but also its volunteers on other areas that where there are other needs. Maybe vaccinating at smaller sites where instead of hundreds of people coming through a day, they're lucky if they can chase down 5 people, but those are 5 people that are high risk and unlikely to come to one of our sites to get vaccinated. And so they need that special care and concern and one-on-one attention that an MRC volunteer or VDH staff can provide, versus a MIC vaccination station where we serve hundreds and hundreds an hour. So it's really not about wasting money or resources. It's about trying to apply the right resource in the right place in the right way. And, a lot of thought goes into that, and a lot of consideration, on needs and, a cost benefit, association. So that's, where that occurred. And hopefully that didn't take away too many opportunities for volunteers, but maybe just refocus those opportunities to other places where the volunteers might be even more effective or useful than a large scale type event. So that being said, I'll get into my final comments. Again, I come into this program really a month on the job as the state volunteer coordinator, but I've been with VDH, like I said, for 18 years, with some different breaks to do active duty Army service, here and there, but had opportunities to work with volunteers, at Henrico through H1N1, and then, as a regional coordinator and at state level, work with volunteers in different capacities. And I've always been amazed at the willingness of volunteers to step up and do big things and do big jobs. And even though, Mary pointed out, a lot of our volunteer workforce are retired, they're no less capable. And, they're still very smart and very capable. And many of them can run circles around some of our full-time staff in terms of, their health and fitness. And, they bring a great attitude, they bring a smile. And, I have to say, there's no job too big or important to entrust to a volunteer. We just need to train them and resource them correctly and make sure that we're doing things the right way, and that, we're using your full talent to the best of your advantage and the best of our advantage. And that this is a beneficial program that